finishing up now with the last two questions that I call detail dual questions. So if we go ahead and take a look at these questions, why I call them detail dual is they're kind of a mixture of a line reference that you're going to be looking at for one passage, but then you're going to ask what the other passage would think about what was mentioned in that line reference. So it's a little bit of a detail-specific question because you got to go and find that line reference, in this case, line 21 for number 46. But then you got to think, all right, what would passage 2 think about that? And again, this is where, like we talked about in the previous episode, knowing the relationship between the passages is the key. We already discussed that they're opposites, they're opposed, they disagree. That's going to be important for us to figure out the answer to these questions. So how would the authors of passage 2 most likely respond to the prospect referred to in line 21? So let's go here. Furthermore, the prospect of de-extinction is profound news. That something as irreversible and final as extinction might be reversed is a stunning realization. So the prospect is basically just the idea that de-extinction could be used. What did passage 2 think about it? Well, we already discussed that passage 2 is opposed to what passage 1 is saying. Passage 2 doesn't think it will be a good idea, or at least we should, as we saw in a previous question, urge caution about it. We shouldn't think it's going to fix all our problems. So let's go to the choices. A, with approval? No, we can get rid of A right away because passage 2 is not going to approve of it. With resignation. So be careful here. Resignation does not mean to, resign your job. Resignation means like you've given up or you are kind of accepting something even though you don't like it. So let's say that might, I don't think the author really is resigned to this. They're actively opposing it. Let's see, with resignation because the gradual extinction of many living species is inevitable. And the author never made that claim. In fact, the author believes that we can fix the decline of species, doesn't think it's inevitable. So B just doesn't quite fit. I mean, it is negative, which is what we're looking for. We're looking for something somewhat opposed to it. But we won't say the author is resigned. The author doesn't think that, living species is inevitable, so what's the point? We should just kind of give up. The author's not really saying that, so get rid of it. With concern, because it implies an easy solution to a difficult problem. That looks pretty good. We'll come back to this one. With disdain, because it shows that people have little understanding of the importance of genetic diversity. Disdain, which is very strong dislike bordering on hatred, is too strong here. The author isn't out and out hating on the idea. The author is just saying that we have to be very careful and cautious with it, and we can't assume that it's going to be this great thing. So D is too strong, and this idea of genetic diversity, I don't think it would be a good critique anyway of the problem with it. Certainly not the critique the author makes here, that the other side doesn't understand the importance of genetic diversity. Going back to C, there's actually evidence for this in the text. We can see this in lines 42 to 46. A program to restore extinct species poses a risk of selling the public on a false promise that technology alone can solve our ongoing environmental woes, an implicit assurance that if a species goes away, we can snap our fingers and bring it back. In other words, this technology makes things seem too simple, makes it seem like we can fix problems really easily, which goes exactly with what we saw in choice C. 47. Which choice would best support the claim that the author of passage 2 recognized that the imagination soars in response to de-extinction technology? So we go back to 24. The imagination soars, just the thought of mammoths and passenger pigeons alive again invokes the awe and wonder that drives all conservation at its deepest level. So we want to know which reference would support the idea that the author of passage 2 see or understand the idea that this technology is kind of amazing to at least imagine or think about, right? So let's just go right to the lines here. This is not one I would do by reading through. I would go right to the lines in this case because they're asking for, the specific lines. I would actually go to the lines here and see which one would give us a focused answer on this. You also could reread it, but let's see. The idea of bringing back extinct species holds obvious gee whiz appeal and a respite from a steady stream of grim news. So this actually looks pretty good. The gee whiz appeal is kind of like the imagination soars. It's like, wow, this technology, at least on the surface, seems like amazing. Well, imagine all these things you could do with it. Gee whiz, right? So this actually might work. So we're going to hold A aside. Let's see if we find anything better. 30 to 33. Yet with limited intellectual bandwidth and financial resources to go around, de-extinction threatens to divert attention from the modern biodiversity crisis. Doesn't really seem to say anything about the imagination soars. 58 to 59. That is not to say that de-extinction enterprise lacks merit altogether. All right, well, here the author is saying that de-extinction might actually be somewhat useful, but that's not saying the imagination soars. It's a very moderate position in comparison to what we read in passage 1. 61 to 63. For example, extinct versions of genes could be reintroduced into species and subspecies that have lost a dangerous amount of genetic diversity. Okay, it's a nice positive, I guess, but that's not exactly, doesn't really make the imagination soar, does it? No, we're looking for something much more grand, and we get that in choice A. So we'll go with choice A. To learn more about Reason Prep's SAT, SAT subject test, and ACT video courses, go to reasonprep.com/enroll, and you can find the link in the description below the video.